Hello ladies, welcome back to the lecture series on postcolonial writing. Today we'll look into Wole Soyinka as a writer, his major works, his life and so let us start from a few of Wole Soyinka's famous quotes. You can see that is being displayed in the screen. You know that he was the first black African to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. These are some of his major works, his famous plays: A Dance of the Forest, Death of the King's Horseman, The Lion and the Jewel, Conky's Harvest, and The Strong Breed. He has written so many plays, about 20, just mentioning the most important among them, and of course The Strong Breed, that's there in your syllabus. So Wole Soyinka was born in Abeokuta in Nigeria. As I mentioned earlier, he was the first African to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. He sometimes wrote of most West Africa in a satirical style, especially he was a political writer, but his serious intent and his belief in the evils inherent in the exercise of power usually was evident in his works. So he got his Nobel in 1986, and of course you know that he writes in English, and his nationality is Nigerian. As a human rights activist, he has been a courageous voice for justice, freedom, and the end of tyranny. He has risked his life again and again to articulate the moral principles that provide the foundation of human rights both in his native Nigeria and around the world. He has been imprisoned for a while, especially during the Biafra revolts that we'll be looking into later in this presentation itself. So, coming to his birth and childhood, his father was a priest in the Anglican Church and a principal of a school. His mother owned a store and was active within the women's liberation movement in Africa. Of course, he belongs to the Yoruba tribe, and how this is important is that in all his works, he has tried to broaden the spirit of this Yoruba culture, and he tried to rejuvenate his culture and try to bring in the whole ideal superstitions, everything that is related to his tribe. Their culture has influenced him a lot. So after his university studies in 1954 at the Government College in Ibadan in Nigeria itself, he continued his higher studies at the University of Leeds. In 1960, he was awarded a Rockefeller Bursary Fellowship and he returned to Nigeria to study African drama. There, he founded a theatre group named the 1960 Masks, and in 1964 he founded the Horizon Theatre Company, in which he has produced his own plays and taken part as an actor too. During the civil war in Nigeria, Soyinka appealed in an article for ceasefire. For this, he was arrested in 1967, accused of conspiring with the Biafra rebels, and was held as a political prisoner for 22 months until 1969. He wrote his famous prison notes at this time. The name often actually reminds us about Antonio Gramsci's prison notebooks. Later in 1973, he took his doctorate from the University of Leeds itself. So after studying in Nigeria and UK, he worked at the theatre in London for a while. He has periodically been appointed as a visiting professor at the universities of Cambridge, Sheffield, and Yale. Wole Soyinka writes in English, and he is best known as a playwright, even though he used to write articles, poems, novels, non-fiction, etc. Alongside his literary career, he has also worked as an actor in the theatres in Nigeria as well as in Great Britain. His works also include this essays articles which are published in different journals. He also worked with a journal for a while as an editor. That will come to those points in the same slide later. And yeah, coming to the style of his writing, his works are rooted in his native Nigeria and the Yoruba culture with its legends, tales, and traditions. His writing also includes the influences from the Western tradition. Of course, his education was in London, so naturally he was close to London theatre also. Naturally, those elements will come in. So this from his he was influenced by these classical tragedies as well as the modern drama in English. In these and Wole Soyinka's dramas, Western elements are skillfully fused with the subject matter and dramatic techniques deeply rooted in Yoruba folklore and religion. He used to write in this postmodern style. Then symbolism, flashback, and ingenious plotting contribute to a postmodern dramatic structure. His best works exhibit humor and fine poetic style, irony, and satire. So, in his writings, we can see that in Nigeria is under a transition, is undergoing some kind of transition. So he maintains this element in or the spirit in his works. He says that the recorder, that an artist is the recorder of the mores and experience of the society and the voice of vision in his own time. As a playwright, Soyinka bridges the distance between these two disparate cultures in his works by infusing Western dramatic forms with elements of traditional Yoruban performance such as masking, drama, and drums. In this way, he both chronicled the social and political experience of modern Nigeria and creates on stage the ideal fusion that Nigeria has failed to achieve in reality, especially politically and the social life. They were actually trying for this ideal fusion but never attained. So he just portrayed that in his works. Now just look at the awards and honors he got. He got a numberless awards and honors. I haven't listed the whole thing over here. It is easily available in Wikipedia or any other site which gives his biography. Just the important ones. The first one he got, first award or honor he got was that fellowship, that grant we have already talked about, that he got in 1966. Then comes this John Whiting Drama Prize in 1966. Then he won this Dakar Negro Arts Festival Award in 1966. Then in 1968 he got Jock Campbell Award and of course the prestigious Nobel in 1986. Then he was honored as the commander of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 1986. Then a Golden Plate Award of the American Academy of Achievement in 2009. As I mentioned, he got a countless awards. That list you can find in the Wikipedia. And also an honorary doctorates from different universities across the world. That we can't actually mention it in one or two sentences over here. Then he has actually published about 20 works, drama, novel, poetry, then non-fiction, memoirs, etc. Writes in English and his literary language is marked by great scope and richness of words. You can see some of them, his important place here. This is not a complete list, of course. This is just an important place. As a dramatist, he has been influenced by J.M. Synge. Of course, you might be familiar with the Irish writer J.M. Synge, but he links up with the traditional popular African theatre because, of course, you can find Irish myths in Synge's writing. That's why we have a tendency to compare him with this African writer. And also he combines so Wole Soyinka combines the elements of dance, music, and action here. He bases his writing on the mythology of his own tribe, the Yoruba, with Ogun, the god of iron and war, at the center. So he wrote his first play during his time in London, that is this Swamp Dweller in 1958. Here I have actually given the years in which these plays have been performed, not being published. As, for example, this 1958 performed drama The Swamp Dwellers was being published as a work some 4 or 5 years later. So that those years might differ. Since it is a play, I have actually given the year in which these are being performed. And another one is The Lion and the Jewel, that was performed in 1959. And the another one, The Trial of Brother Jero, that was in 1960. This has a sequel that came later, that is Jero's Metamorphosis, that was performed in 1974. This is actually a sequel to this, The Trial of Brother Jero, that was performed in 1960. Now A Dance of the Forest, The Road, Conky's Harvest, then the Strong Breed, then this Strong Breed and the Swamp Dweller were considered as his philosophical plays. When you study the Strong Breed in detail, you will understand that it is a philosophical play, and there are so many ideas that are being intermingled there. Then you have the Madman and Specialists, then the Bacchae of Euripides. This actually Bacchae, he has this Bacchae of Euripides was performed in London. He has rewritten this for the African stage later in 1977. So he has rewritten this Bacchae with some difference in the setting and all, and performed in the African stage and in an opera, that was in 1977. Then we have Death and the King's Houseman, then this Requiem for a Futurologist, which was performed in 1985. So these are some of the most important plays that are being performed in these years respectively. Now we look into the fiction and non-fiction category. The two important novels he has written are The Interpreters which was published in 1965, and The Season of Anomy, which was published in 1973. And when it comes to fiction, we can actually compare his writing style to James Joyce or William Faulkner of America, because you know that both of their works, writing style, are very complicated. Modernist writing, stream of consciousness technique, very complex style of writing, and non-linear narration. So all these things are the factors or elements that come in the writing style of Wole Soyinka also. And then in this novel, The Interpreters, actually 6 Nigerian intellectuals discuss and interpret their African experiences. And in this Season of Anomy, it is based on the writer's thoughts during his imprisonment, that during the Biafra war, and he is actually confronting the Orpheus and Eurydice myth with the mythology of Yoruba. As I told you earlier, he has a tendency to mix or relate everything with his own Yoruba tribe. And the works, The Man Died Prison Notes, this was written while he was in prison during that Biafra war. Then this is purely autobiographical, and this Ache, which was published in 1981, was one work in which he discusses about his childhood. Same with Isara. Also this it's also about the parental warmth and his relationship with parents. And the Ibadan, then the Pentlim's years, then the recent work You Must Set Forth and On. This is also a memoir from it is about various aspects that happened in his life. Now coming to his critical works, the most acclaimed among his critical work is Myth, Literature and the African World. It's a collection of essays in which he examines the role of the artist in the light of Yoruba mythology and symbolism. So if you can read a little bit more about this myth, literature and the African world, that will be useful for your essays related to your play, because it has a lot of Yoruban myth to deal with. Now the next one is Art, Dialogue and Outrage, which was published in 1988, and then The Open Sore of a Continent, published in 1996. Then The Burden of Memory, The Muse of Forgiveness, which was published in 1999. Now coming to the poems, his poems shows a close connection to his plays, which are in especially in the collected forms. First published collection is Ida and Other Poems, which was published in 1967. Then his verse is characterized by a precise command of language and his mastery of lyric, dramatic, and meditative poetic forms. And also poems from prison, of course, those written while he was in prison. Then I guess one of his famous poem, A Telephonic Conversation, you might be familiar with. It talks about racism. Then there are he wrote a good number of poems from prison while he was jailed in the period 1967 to 69 for speaking out against the war brought on by the attempted secession of Biafra from Nigeria. Then other different the important poems are A Shuttle in the Crypt, then Mandela's Earth and Other Poems, which was published in 1988, then Samarkand and Other Markets I have known, that was published in 2002. So from 1960 to 1964, Soyinka also served as a co-editor of a journal named Black Orpheus. After winning Nobel Prize, many of his lectures were published. His Nobel lecture was also important because he has mentioned quite a lot of things about racism in his country as well as around the world, and many other corruptions that are happening across the world. So his Nobel lecture was also important. And the lectures after that, especially the Wraith lectures of 2004, Climate of Fear, that is also a lecture which was held in 2004, are the most notable among them. And then his latest published essay is Beyond Aesthetics, Use, Abuse and Dissonance in African Art Traditions, which was published in 2019. Soyinka has long been a proponent of Nigerian democracy. His decades of political activism included periods of imprisonment and exile, and he has headed or participated in several political groups, including the National Democratic Organization and the National Liberation Council of Nigeria, also in the pro-national conference organizations. So in 2010, he himself founded a political party named the Democratic Front for a People's Federation. So through this new party, he says it aims to tackle the corruption and improve the health and education in Nigeria. So before ending, I would also like to say a few things about Soyinka. He has been a strong critic of successive Nigerian governments, especially the country's many military dictators as well as other political tyrannies, including Mugabe, the regime in the Zimbabwe, etc. Much of his writing has been concerned with the oppressive boot and the irrelevance of the color of the foot that wears it. In the Nobel lecture, Soyinka levels a comprehensive accusation against European racism. He took Nelson Mandela's life as a paradigm and uses his own presence in Stockholm to receive Nobel as a supplement to Mandela's absence. He addresses the crimes of apartheid and political corruption both within his country and as a means to expose the global crisis regarding the same. So that's all about his life and works today. He is still working as a major political activist in Nigeria and around Africa. So we'll deal with his major themes and other literary qualities in the next lecture. Thank you.